Welcome to the Home Team Sacramento podcast. I'm Josh Takimoto, and tonight we have a basketball player and host of the True to Life podcast, Nanik Tagore. What's going on, man?
Man, thank you so much for having me, Josh. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'm excited to chat with you. We've been following your stuff for a little while, and it was funny. I was trying to think back because you looked familiar once we started following your page and you reached out and all that, but I couldn't quite place where you looked familiar from. And then all of a sudden it hit me. You had done a podcast with Kevin Bracey through the
Indeed.
San Juan Unified School District when you were doing that podcast. And then it
Yes.
all the pieces kind of fell into place. I'm like, okay, that's how I recognize this dude. He looked familiar. So man, I'm excited to have this conversation with you and dive into your background a little bit and everything that you're doing.
No, me too. Yeah, no, that podcast goes way back. It was the San Juan Unified Student Podcast. Kind of got me into this whole thing, and Kevin Bracey was a great guest, and it's cool to have that connection with you right away.
For sure, man. Yeah, Kevin doesn't miss ever. So he's the man, and he's gonna be excited to know. I didn't tell him before we start recording, but he'll be
I
excited to
actually just
know.
texted. I texted him like right before we hopped on, actually, because I realized I was on your guys' page, and I saw that he's associated with it, so
Yeah.
I shot him a text. So that's awesome.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Um, and one more thing before I forget. So I know you. I want to know about your athletic background and all that, but it was funny, and I didn't realize until I was kind of doing some research on you. And I know you played for San Juan High School. I didn't even know this when I booked it. I actually have Coach Bryant on next week.
Mitchell.
Coach,
Oh,
or is it
Bryant is Fred.
Fred Bryant? Was he? He was your coach, right?
Oh, I'm gonna talk about him later today. Absolutely,
I
he's been major.
it didn't even hit me until like I said, probably about 2 or 3 hours ago when I was looking up some stuff about you. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize it was back to back weeks. So it'll be a fun conversation with him next week, and I'll mention that you were on this podcast. So
Yeah, Coach
um,
Fred's big time. Yeah, we'll get into it.
for sure. So that's enough of me talking, man. That's enough of the intro. Tell me a little bit about your athletic background, where you grew up, where you're from, all that.
Yeah, so I'm based out of Sacramento. Sacramento's in my home. Grew up going to public schools, the San Juan Unified School District. Went to Gold River Discovery Center, and then on to San Juan High School. Played 4 years of varsity ball there. Well, technically not my junior year because of COVID, but would have been playing varsity there. So, um, great experience at San Juan High School. Having it being one of the smaller schools in San Juan Unified, I had a lot more attention on myself to focus on my school, my academics, but also dive into my sport and also extracurriculars. Because it was a smaller school, the focus was really on me and getting to develop as my own person. And I really credit that to a lot of my success because the people I met there, including Coach Fred, was laid the groundwork for who I am and just what I'm about. And after San Juan, also playing AAU ball. I was part of YBA Elite out of Rockland for travel ball. So travel ball was big because I got to go around California and play against like some of the other best teams in the area. And that was great for exposure and meeting people. And then I got the opportunity to come here, go for a workout at Holy Names University in Oakland. Unfortunately, that school, when I got an offer, committed to play there. Redshirted my first year at Holy Names. School ended up shutting down, and in the process of that, came here for a workout at Dominican, and we everything kind of lined up, and now I'm here at Dominican, which is a Division II school in the Pac West Conference, and continuing my athletic journey here at Dominican University in San Rafael. So, looking on to another 3 years after this one because I have 4 years left. Yeah, and just keep the basketball dream going.
That's awesome, man. And it's interesting too, because you're kind of in a unique spot on this podcast specifically because most of the people we've had on have been coaches or are currently coaches now, or they're athletes that, are not currently playing it at the college level, or, they played high school, or I know we've had some people that, played in the Olympics and stuff like that, but you're actually like currently playing, which is kind of a cool
Yeah.
thing. So I'm excited to kind of pick your brain about that because and we'll talk more about your podcast later, but I love the fact that you focus so much attention to student athletes
Yeah.
because and you know this better than anybody because you're currently doing it. It's such a unique place in life because, you have all these opportunities to learn these awesome life lessons through sports, but then also you're still trying to compete and you're still pursuing a dream. And so it's a very unique place in life. And so I'm interested to hear more about, everything that you've gone through and all of that. But, one of the questions I'm interested in hearing from you right now is, as a student athlete yourself, and then the people that you talk to, what do you think if you had to pinpoint maybe one challenge that student athletes face right now? I know there's so many different things, and it's like,
Yeah.
how do you pick just one? But if you had to pick one, what would you say is the biggest thing that you guys are facing right now?
I think honestly right now it's the transfer portal because I think almost all, I know basketball specifically, but the ability to transfer and move within schools is, really creating up a log jam for, high school, student athletes that are coming up. COVID obviously backed things up too, and you can still kind of feel the effects of that now. Maybe it's more realistic that, an athlete, even though they may be skilled to play at a, Division 2, Division 3 school or NAIA school, or if they want to play at a 4 year, it's more likely that they go to a junior college now just because of, opportunities. I mean, you have to put yourself in the position of a 4 year. I mean, they're going to be looking at that portal first for athletes. So I think high school athletes now really need to realize that, JUCO, you need to knock the stigma off of like going to a JUCO like it's a bad thing, and just accept that challenge and just get after it. And that might be tough, like coming from me that I am at a 4 year right now, but a lot of my friends are, in the JUCO grind right now, and it's real, but it might be the, one of the only options if you really want to play, college sports. And I think that is probably one of the biggest issues facing student athletes because, the glamour of being in a 4 year, like that's attracting to a lot of people, but right now it might not be as realistic. I mean, scholarships, I mean, coaches' jobs are on the line. I mean, there's like the real factors. I see it, firsthand. Being in a 4 year, so for student athletes to realize that's gonna be really important.
Now, have there been a lot of athletes that you've known that are so discouraged by everything that's going on with the transfer portal, and they have that stigma in their head of a JC, where they don't even, they just basically stop playing? Like, have you seen that a lot?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of my friends that definitely could have, kept going. Recently I was just, talking to one of my old buddies from middle school, a little bit into high school, and he wasn't going to keep playing, and he took about a year off and just had nothing to do. He wasn't playing, and now he's out at Santa Barbara Community College. So he took that year thinking he wasn't going to play, but now he's out there playing again. So I mean, if you really love it, you're gonna find a way to make it happen, I think is what it comes down to. So I think it definitely depends on that. But no, I do see it because it is discouraging. I mean, if you don't have that many offers and you just have to go to your local JC, it's not the most, not the best looking option, but sometimes it's what you have to do if you want to keep that dream alive.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good life lesson for people too, and I think it's awesome when you have a group of people that are willing to go that route, because, like you said, they're willing to do whatever it takes to get to their dream. It's a good life lesson because, like, hey, like, life is difficult. And I saw a video the other day someone showed me where they're like, sometimes we have this idea that if we get to the next level, then things will be easier, and it's not. And if you get to the next level, it just never is. You graduate high school, it's going to be easier. No, it's going to get more difficult. Life happens. And so um anybody who's in that position who is willing to kind of persevere and push through is huge, because that's going to benefit you down the road. Even if your career stops at the JC, or maybe you play a 4 year college, but that's where your career stops, you never go any further. When you get your career, your family, life, those types of things are going to benefit you. And I think it's going to shape your mindset moving forward.
No, I think that's a dangerous, mindset for athletes to get into of, oh, after this practice, okay, now I can just relax. Even taking it down to just that, like that there's going to be this, at some point you just get to relax and things are going to get easier. Because in reality, if you're chasing a goal and you're chasing success, it's not going to get easier. It's just going to progress. And, a video that I saw and that got me thinking is, I think it was like the Duke women's coach talking about like handling hard better. It's like
That
things
was the
aren't going
one. That
that
was the
was the
one.
one. Okay,
That
that's
was
what I
the
thought.
one.
Cause that's what I think about is like you gotta learn how to handle like the hard things better. It's not gonna get easier. I think that's like the something that I think athletes gotta try to avoid is like it's not gonna get easier. It's gotta handle hard better. So keeping that in mind.
So let me ask you this, because you kind of mentioned that you play AAU, and I'm sure you've been to some of these high level tournaments where everybody's good, right? And everybody thinks they're the best, right? Do you think that because I mean, I feel like when I was playing baseball back in the day, you had some travel teams and stuff like that, but it's definitely that space with the showcases and travel teams has gotten a lot bigger now. Do you feel like plays a role when it comes to this mentality that like, hey, a JC is not good enough? Because growing up, a lot of these kids are in these programs, in these showcases, in these tournaments with the expectation that it's going to take them to the highest level. And I'm just wondering if there's like a disconnect between what they're expecting and then the reality of the situation.
I mean, the truth is, not everyone can get a full ride. Not everyone can get that, Division One, Division Two scholarship. There's only so much money out there to be, given and scholarship wise. So yeah, there's definitely a little bit of a disconnect because you played with some of these quote unquote best guys. Like, you may have played against them or played with them, and they may have got the opportunity, and you can compete with them, but that doesn't mean you're going to get the opportunity necessarily. So that can be frustrating. Like, absolutely, it's going to be frustrating because, if I have a teammate that I thought that I was better than, and I was always outworking him in practice, but somehow he got the offer before me. That's discouraging. I think that's where some of that disconnect lies because what you're seeing, you're constantly comparing yourself, and that's natural in, human nature for comparing ourselves to others. But yeah, I definitely think there's a little bit of a disconnect there.
Man, I think you hit the nail on the head. That disconnect is tough, especially in sports,
Yeah,
because like when you're competing against someone in a sport, in a way, you're constantly comparing yourself against them in the middle of a game, right? Because you're competing and you're trying to be 1 point or one, score better than they are. And so it's tough not to compare yourself in those situations, especially when you are, you have a ton of dreams and a ton of goals you're trying to accomplish. And when you see someone else do it, it's really tough not to. But I think it's smart to kind of stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish, not listen to all the noise, and keep it moving. But it's tough sometimes.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. um Sorry, let me pull my notes up real quick. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, and I love asking this question to people who played in high school and then had the opportunity to play at the next level. And I think when we make that, I didn't make that jump. I don't know why I said we. I didn't make that jump. I stopped in high school. I barely played there. But when people
It's
make
okay.
that jump, I think
Yeah.
there's all these ideas of what it's going to be like, right? And then the reality kicks in once you get there, and it's like, man, this was very different than what I was expecting. So, what were a couple of things that maybe were eye opening to you once you made it to that next level and you started playing at a 4-year school, and how much did it change your mindset, and what did you have to learn quickly in order to adapt to that situation?
Yeah, honestly, it's a loaded question. It's a great question because you have to learn quick. You get out to school, you got orientation and all that, normal stuff before practice starts up. And I'm speaking from the, Division two calendar, which is a little bit different. Division two, before your season starts, you're restricted to only 8 hours a week with your coaches. So it's not super, time consuming. You get like about an hour or so, and you got some lifts, but 8 hours a week is not bad. And you actually get mandated 2 days off every week until I think it's October 5th or October 6th. So we're actually coming up on that date pretty soon. And so the first week for me, I found that, or the first month when, I first dove into all this was, oh, this is not too bad. It was definitely more physical. The physicality was the first thing that I learned. Because guys were all older, stronger, quicker. Uh, but also it was managing the stuff outside of just practice. So we had study hall that was, mandatory. It was like 4 to 6 hours a week. So getting those hours in, the team lifts and also lifting outside of, just the required 3 lifts a week because you're not going to get much stronger just lifting 3 times a week, playing, college basketball. So making sure to have time for that as well, and then just training on my own too, in addition to my classes, because now I'm taking college classes, so that's a whole nother ball game too. I took like 17 units my first semester, so I had a lot going on with the school side too. So, I mean, for me, and I've actually made an episode about this on my own podcast, was organization. I mean, that
Yeah.
was the first thing I learned was, okay, we need to really just lock in on the organization piece. So my Google Calendar, mapping out all my classes, all of my, trainings, any other extracurricular things that I'm doing outside of the sports and school, and just learning what my routine looks like every day and making sure I have time for myself because I learned really quick as we got into the season. I was a redshirt too, so I wasn't even having to stress about actually playing in games, but I was still getting burnt out mentally sometimes. So really making sure I prioritize my mental health and my rest too a little bit. as much as I could within reason, because you can't just take a week off and just leave when you're mid season. Like that's just not an option. So you need to find ways to sometimes push through, knowing to push back, and just listen to your body. I think it's really important for student athletes to be in tune with their body, whether that be meditation, journaling, therapy. I mean, these are all things that have helped me, and like I'll openly admit it, they helped me get through the course of a season because I have an outlet. Basketball can be a great outlet for a lot of student athletes, but you also need other things, to get all the stress on your mind off. So I think that those are some of the things that I learned pretty quick. And I had to, and now coming in this year, knowing what I had known last year, I mean, I right away, like our school offers, counseling services. So I'm not in a mental health crisis right now, but I'm still seeing a therapist, every Monday just to talk about things that are going on. And I'll openly talk about it because mental health is very important. And in addition to that, trying to meditate 10 minutes a day, doing my Google Calendar, seeing the trainer, getting the recovery stuff done. Like that stuff's all so important. And I feel like this first month, my body feels good, my mind feels good. And I really credit that to everything I learned last year. So it's important to learn quick and find a routine that works for you.
Man, I don't even know why we have to go on with the podcast. We could just drop the mic right there. I love it, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot there, and I love it all, man. Because I think I always thought, especially with athletes and athletes I've talked to over the years, and just being around athletes my whole life, the mental health thing is interesting, right? Because I've always told people this, like it's something that we don't want to deal with as athletes a lot of times because we're competitive and we just want to, like, if I just keep pushing, I'll get through it, right? Just like
Yeah,
anything else. You're doing like suicides on the basketball court. You're doing, you're in the gym, you're lifting, you just push through a little bit further and you'll get through it. But it's almost like if you compare that to how we train our bodies, if you had the opportunity to go to a specialist or a trainer who is able to fix the areas of your strength and your explosiveness and your quickness, like we would take that up immediately.
100%.
It's the same thing with the mind. If there's parts of your mind that are not right, and you have the opportunity to go to someone that can help you with that, it's the same thing as training your body. It's just you're training a different part of your body. It's your mind. And so it's great to hear that you're openly talking about that, because I think a lot of athletes, especially once they get to the level you're at, and they are going through everything that you just said, and the grind, and the all of the different things you have to organize and keep track of. And on top of that, you're doing a podcast too, which good for you, man, because I know from this side of things how long a podcast can take
Yeah.
to record and book guests and the whole thing. So it's awesome that you're able to do all those things and you're able to do it in a healthy way. I think that's great, man.
No, I think when you ask athletes how much of the game is mental, they always say that it's 70%, 80%, some say even 90% mental, but for whatever reason, our training and our daily life doesn't reflect the percentage of which we think that the game is mental. And it's much easier to go and just lift weights and get shots up. And it's hard to just sit with your thoughts for 10, 15 minutes every day and just reflect, or to make time to journal, or just like put your thoughts on paper, or just dedicate that time. I mean, it's a little more uncomfortable. It's easier to go pump weights because you see results right away. And when I was working with a mental performance coach last year, it's like when you're lifting weights or you're getting shots up, you can see the tangible benefits like right after, like after a great workout, you'll see that pump, right? Or like you'll see some definition or something like that. But if you sit for a 10-15 minute meditation, you might not necessarily feel better right away, but it's just about like stacking those good days. And but yeah, no, the mental piece is really important. Should definitely be worked on.
Yeah, for sure. Um, who's your favorite ball player of all time? And then is it different than who your favorite player is right now?
For me, I know it's Steph Curry hands down for multiple reasons. Not just the way he shoots the ball, because that's, I mean, its own special piece. And for me, it's watching him being like the player he was, and how he grew up, and how he transitioned into college and then to the NBA. Seeing how his story just fascinates me. An undersized guard, like a more skinnier, it's like a 6'2", 6'3", skinny guard. You saw him at Davidson. Went to a small D1. Worked, got a shot in the NBA, and then you see his transformation in the NBA, how he just dives into lifting and gets so much stronger. Just his ridiculous attention to detail, how he's been able to transform his game regardless of what the scouts say, what anyone says, and he's just that. To me, he's that underrated story, and he's like the best player at that. I think I personally have him as best point guard of all time. Crazy take because some people have Magic, but
Sure.
I mean Steph Curry is just phenomenal. And just for me, like studying his game, how he runs off screens, how he handles the ball, his movement, off ball. For me, watching that from like the basketball side of things is when I'm in open gyms, I try to play like that. I try to run all over the place and be the one that's running around the most. And he comes off screens and shoots the rock so quick. I could talk about Steph all day. He's definitely my favorite player. And I'm a Kings fan. I'm Sacramento Kings fan all the way. It was devastating what he did to us in Game 7 of the
Yeah.
playoffs. That broke my heart.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, yeah, this is greatness. This is my guy. So, yeah, Steph Curry hands down.
It's tough. I was talking to someone who was at Game 7,
I
and
was there actually.
you were there too.
I was there.
Man, it's a weird thing because I mean, again, I'm a baseball guy, and this hasn't happened to me yet. I'm sure it will at some point, but it's kind of like watching your favorite team get no hit at home. It's like, this sucks because we're gonna lose, but then I'm also seeing something amazing happen at the same time. And I imagine, like you said, there was some mixed feelings. That I mean, obviously the loss is worse, but at the same time, you walk away thinking, I just saw something historic, which is pretty cool.
You witnessed a great moment, all time Game 7 performance. I
Yeah.
mean, absolutely,
So I guess at least you got that when you walked away from the stadium that day because
100%. I,
yeah,
I
and
definitely didn't get to see him in the second round, but I got to see that performance.
man, yeah. And I love everything you hear about Curry too when it comes to him being a teammate too, because I feel like I mean I don't think you hear too many people that have ever talk about anything negative coming from the locker room from him or anything like that. I think it seems like he's a not just a great player and one of an all time great, but also someone who is the glue that holds that place together too.
The thing about Steph too, I didn't even talk about this much, when I was talking about the basketball side of him, but also just how humble he is through it all, like knowing that he's the best shooter of all time, but he's humble but confident. The way he strikes that balance is, inspiring to me how he does that. He's also like a family guy, and there's so much to like about him. Like he's such an all around, great person to follow and to look up to, honestly.
100%. It's actually a great way to segue into this next question as far as looking up to people.
Yeah.
One of the questions I love asking, and I'm excited to hear your answer because you are, so fresh off your high school career. I'm always fascinated because I feel like the athletes that we are and the life lessons that we take as we move out of our sports and through life, a lot of those things come from coaches because the coaches are with us when you're in season in high school and then obviously in college. You're really with your coaches more than you're with even your own family. You're with them all the time. And so I've seen it, and I'm sure you have too, where a coach has the opportunity to impact the life of an athlete, either for the positive or, and unfortunately, sometimes the negative. Where I know guys that stopped playing the sport altogether because they had a bad experience with a coach who didn't really have their back, and then I know other guys who still will reach out and spend time with coaches that they played for 20 years ago. And so, all that being said, for you, who is a coach that you look at and think, man, that person had a tremendous impact on my life?
Yeah, for me, one person definitely comes to mind. But before I share that, I would have to say that there has been so many that have poured into me. All the way back into middle school when I started playing basketball to now, AAU, playing just at the rec center. I mean, there's just been so many different coaches and so many different trainers that have poured into me, whether it be one training, one season, 4 years. I mean, so many coaches have poured into me, so I wouldn't be the player I am without all of it together. But the single one with the greatest impact, hands down, Coach Freddie Bryant.
On the show next week. Didn't
On the
realize that
show next
happened,
week.
but he'll be on the show next week.
And I think that is not a coincidence. I think that is that is meant to be because Coach Fred is he's a special person, and he taught me to look at the game and life in a different way. To be more introspective and reflect on myself and the game. Because when I came to him in seventh grade, for training, I found him on Coach Up, and I remember when going in there for my first training. I didn't know that was going to turn into a 6 year, 7 year long relationship, which it now is. I mean, I was going there for him as a basketball trainer. I was still in, playing middle school basketball, Gold River Discovery Center, and that then, turned into a lifelong mentor of mine. So, I mean, Coach Fred has poured into me in so many different ways, through training, through coaching, and also just through the mindfulness and the life aspect of it. I mean, he's so great. I mean, he's one of the only coaches that reaches out to me, to this day. Like we touch base multiple times a week, just checking in on each other. He really taught me a lot about energy and absorbing, like, different people's energy in a room, and he really taught me how to lead, because I would always be asking questions, and when I was frustrated, he put me on varsity as a freshman and knew that was a challenge for me, and that, who knows, like maybe if I would have played JV, maybe I wouldn't have became the leader I am today. So him making those like very small decisions that I feel impacted my trajectory at San Juan, you know, coming off the bench as a freshman when, I could have been just the all-star on the JV team scoring 30 a game, but instead I was coming off the bench and working out with the stronger guys on the varsity team, and then transitioning to sophomore year when I was in more of a leadership role. And then, getting through the whole COVID year, and then coming back senior year, leading that team and just dominating the ball more. And, one MVP of the league that year, optimist all-star. We won league that year, punched our first like playoff berth in 10 years. Like that was the culmination of all of our work together. We have so many special memories together, so many conversations, long bus rides. I mean, man, Coach Fred is, truly amazing, and he's a gift, and he's a fountain of knowledge, and I definitely wouldn't be here without him.
That's awesome, man. And I love that. And I feel like everything you just said lines up so much with everything that our previous guests have said about coaches that have impacted him, where you didn't point to a specific moment in a game where he drew up a specific play that worked out and won the championship game. You didn't, X's and O's. It wasn't about strategy. It was all this, off court stuff, right? It was the life lessons. It was the leadership lessons. It was the energy, like you said. And I always feel like that's a great sign of an amazing coach, is when an athlete thinks of them and they're not even thinking about the sport necessarily. They're thinking about everything else that person invested in and poured into their life. And so I love hearing that. I know we made the right choice by having him on next week. So I'm excited. Let me ask you this. What's one question I should ask him? Toss a question out there for me.
Oh, that's a really good one. I would. This is gonna put him on the spot for sure, because he always says, I wouldn't be surprised if he said this on the pod next week. He says, the years blur together, but I would try to ask him to point out a highlight of his coaching career.
Okay,
Like,
perfect.
try to have him pinpoint a team or a season that was his coaching highlight. And it'll be tough because he's had a lot of them, because he's been
Sure.
coaching for a long time, but like almost make it like a first thing that comes to mind, like what is your coaching highlight, and just see what that first thing is. Like I would be curious to hear that too. So I would definitely see what he has to say to that.
Perfect. I'm going to do it for sure.
Uh,
That's awesome, man. I love hearing that, and it's cool that you guys had so many moments together, and to see a playoff berth come from that season, and obviously all the personal accolades that season too. But even beyond that, to see you guys, all of those connections, the relationship with the coach, you guys as a team come together, and him kind of be at the center of that is awesome. And like I said, it's just a sign of a good coach when you can bring a team together like that, and obviously you see success, but there's so much more to it, when it comes to, just like I said, I say it all the time, but life stuff.
if you don't mind, would you mind if I share one more story that I have about
Yeah,
with Coach
please,
Fred?
please.
Yeah. So this was, senior year. I got invited to, be an athlete at the very first Amazing HQ, Asian American All Star Showcase for basketball.
Sure.
And this is the first one of its kind. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Amazing HQ. They do. I'll have to send you the links. They basically cover Asian American sports.
Okay.
Um, I'm half South Asian, half Indian from my dad's side. So that's how I qualified for the showcase,
Sure.
and basically pulling together some of the best. Asian American hoopers in California. So essentially, it's about like anywhere from 20 to 25 male and 20 to 25 female hoopers out there. And the reason why I share this story is because my mom was busy. I think my dad had something going on, but I went on that trip with Coach Fred. We drove down there together. It was in LA. My mom was able to get us the hotel, and we drove down there like after school. We got in super late. Um, that long car ride, that 6 7 hour car ride, and the time after the showcase, we drove back home, and in between, I think that that's like a symbol of our relationship, and also like how far we had came together, because not every coach or person is dropping their weekend and just going with the player out to a camp, right? So I think that really shows like our relationship, and how important that was, because on that car ride I was able to really pick his brain about how he was in college, and he explained, because I was in my senior year and I'm getting ready to go to college, going to Holy Names. So I was asking him about his experiences when he was, he played Division 1. So I was asking him questions of what it was like, and he was sharing with me stories, and we just had so much time to just talk about his experiences as an athlete, what got him into coaching, his time at Encina, then to San Juan, and I was able to learn so much more about him too. And it's one of my fondest memories of him was going to that camp. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Yeah, man. I was excited about next week because of all the great things that Kevin said about Coach Fred. But man, I'm even more excited about it now that you've shared those different stories, man. So I'm looking forward to that for sure.
It's going to be a good episode. I guarantee it.
I can't wait. So let's jump into the podcast a little bit, because obviously everything that you just said keeps you pretty busy, but now you're also doing a podcast. Tell me a little bit about the podcast, and why you started it and how long. Give me the backstory a little bit and
Yeah.
everything about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the True to Life podcast was born out of my red shirt year. Um, Season was over or nearing over. School was shutting down. I had some extra free time on my hands, because normally there would be spring workouts that are required of the team, get ready for next year, but I had this extra time on my hand, and you know having this little inkling that I liked podcasting and talking to people and interviewing people and hearing their stories, but also just finding a way to provide value for others. Having done the same on Unified Student Podcast, it was a little bit something that I want to explore more. So kind of brainstorming what I wanted to do. Uh, at first I was like, cool, like let's just, I'll have a podcast where I can just, sit with people and just chop it up about like life and their experiences, and, what they've learned and stuff like that. And, you know, I'll share it. I'll send this episode to my dad when it's out. He told me that I needed to have a focused audience, because with the podcast you need to have an audience. So, speaking of something that I've done my whole life, I've been a student athlete my whole life. It's all I know is how to balance school, how to balance athletics, how to balance my own family and my social life too. So having a podcast that covers those topics is something that I can really do. I like the idea because the podcast format is I do some interviews with coaches, some of my personal like life mentors, but also other people that I've met along the way. Coaches, athletic trainers, athletic directors. Like at my school, for example, had a mental performance coach on, fellow athletes. I try to get athletes for different sports as well. So, like soccer, volleyball, baseball, whatever, like whatever it have be, right? To just provide some, context around, the student athlete experience and student athlete life, of just how to balance, your school, your sport, and your social life, because it can be a lot at times. And true to life, honestly comes out of just being authentic and true to myself. And for me, that is giving back to others and trying to approach things in an honest way. And the life component of it is so important to me, because there's life after basketball, there's life after every sport, and I think it's important to know how to build the life that you want. I just It's honestly been really fun too, just to hear so many people's other stories, and getting feedback from people that have been listening, and just seeing the growth. It's been slow. I mean, you start something from nothing, and you see how it kind of grows with just the people that you know, and then slowly how it gets, out. Because like I never knew you, we never had a conversation, but somehow like you guys followed the page and you're liking some of the reels now. Like that just means like it's falling on other people's pages. Like for me, that was rewarding to see how that started happening, because it made me think what other athletes out there are maybe seeing this. It motivates me to want to keep going and just keep providing content, and just giving back. And I know that I'm in it right now, and I think that's really special, because oftentimes you see a lot of the podcasts and people out there, it's people that have already like reached like the pinnacle of success. And for me, it's like I'm struggling in it right now. So in my solo pods that I do, because I do interviews and like some solo episodes where I tackle a topic and then also just talk about my student athlete experience, to kind of give people listening what life is like for me as a college student athlete right now. And that's been really special too, because it also provides an outlet for me to discuss things as a student athlete, and hopefully gives people listening an idea of what it's like. So yeah, it's been a really fun journey so far though.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Shout out to you for doing the solo pods. There's very few things I hate more than a solo pod because it's just so much more challenging.
It is.
And I respect you for doing it. I actually tried doing one last night, very late, and I'm like, this was probably a mistake, because I ended up like, you know what, I'm gonna just call it on this, try again tomorrow. So, but the solo pod, man, the fact that's how it shows me you're passionate about it, man, because the solo pods are not fun. But you do it because you want to get the content to people, and you
It
do it
is.
because you want to continue to, like you said, provide and give back. And so I think that's awesome that you do it. And I think what you're doing with your podcast is awesome, man, because I think, and I'm sure you've experienced this before, there's people that will come through and they'll say, well, there's so many podcasts out there, this and that. It's like, yeah, that's cool. But I've never been one to discourage anybody from doing a podcast, because the bottom line is there's some people that are not going to want to hear from me, but they want to hear from someone else who's doing a very similar thing, or vice versa. And for you, it's like, hey, there might be other sports podcasts, but no one's doing exactly what you're doing, and no one has your personality, no one has your experience. And so
Unique voice.
100%, it's a unique voice. And so I love the fact that you're doing it and that you continue to do it even in the midst of the craziness of life right now. The fact that you still do it, and you're consistent with it too. So one of the things I appreciate about you, man, is that there's a lot of podcasts, and I'm sure you've heard this, there's some stat out there, it's like most podcasts don't make it past episode 10.
Yeah, it's
um
like something like that. Yeah, right.
and
Super quick.
it's quick, and once you get into it, you understand why. But going back to what you said earlier, when you're passionate about something, you'll find a way to do it. And I have two kids, a wife, the whole thing. And so sometimes there's late nights, early mornings, but I figure out a way to do it because I love it too much. You know what I mean? And so seeing you do the same thing and seeing your passion for it is awesome, man. So I'm glad that it's growing, and I'm glad that it continues to move forward.
And I set the intention early when I started, that I knew I probably couldn't keep up with weekly, so why start with weekly? And I remember like my last week or two at Holy Names, I did something like I recorded 7 interviews in 2 weeks or something crazy. It was like 6 interviews in 2 weeks, because I was like, oh shoot, I need content for the summer, because I was actually coaching all summer.
Sure.
I didn't mention this when we started with the coaching background, but I worked with PGC basketball all summer as a basket instructor. So I was around the game as a coach like all summer working with athletes. And I was traveling from place to place, and it's hard to record and produce content on the road. So I had these interviews that I was able to have kind of stacked up. And what was cool was when I interviewed, I tried to keep the questions in the conversation timeless. So I wasn't asking them questions that, you know, were, oh, what's happening in your life right now. So like when people listen to it a month or two from now, it's still like timeless content. So I kind of thought about that. So I have content throughout the whole summer. And then now that I'm back into school again, where I can record, I have my 2 mics, my setup and everything. Now I can get back into my normal flow, but also stick into the bi-weekly setup. And that's how it got me through the whole summer. So that was just a little trick. I don't know if anyone listening would have known that, because it's hard to tell, but that was something behind the scenes that I definitely put thought into.
Man, I feel like this is like inside baseball talk right now. The podcast,
Yeah.
we could have a whole different conversation about this stuff, but I people, anybody who's listened to my podcast, I've been podcasting for a little over 4.5 years now, different podcasts, not just this one. And one of the things I've always said, I'll be honest with this specific podcast, I kind of stepped away from it a little bit, and I wasn't able to follow my own advice. But the consistency is huge, and it doesn't matter what the frequency is. It could be every week, it could be twice a week, it could be once a month. Whatever you decide to do, it just has to be consistent,
Yeah,
and
you
you
gotta
have
stick
to
to it.
let people know that. And I think that's the biggest thing. And so, and I think you having the foresight to record 7 episodes, because I think some people don't understand it's as much fun as podcasting is. Doing 7 interviews and then having to edit 7 interviews is not fun.
It's a lot. And
I
then
mean,
you also want to produce content for social media as well. And that's
yeah,
something that takes a lot of time too, that I want to get more, consistent on too, because I was really on that, and noticed that it's been tough since moving out here. So that's definitely something to focus on too, because that's a whole nother, thing that you got to consider too, is advertising the podcast out there.
it's not my favorite part. I used to enjoy the social media thing, and now it's like, dang, I got to do this again, because it almost feels like you're producing another podcast.
Yeah, I
Sometimes
know.
it's like I have to think of another clip. Like, I'm not that interesting. I'm not that funny. I don't know what to do here. But you have to kind
That's
of keep,
funny.
trying
Yeah.
to find stuff. So I'm constantly having conversations with people that are younger than me, trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? Because I'm getting old now. I'm 35. I'm starting to get to that point where I'm like, I don't want TikTok. I have to do it. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do
Yeah.
it. And
The
so
algorithms and all that stuff. It's
all that
tricky.
stuff, man. And so, but we keep going back to it. Like, if you're passionate about it, you got to try to figure it out and make it work. And so,
Absolutely.
um, so you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but what was the response like to the podcast?
Yeah. So, I mean, starting off, it was, off rep, kind of advertising it on my own Instagram. And, people that, follow me and know me, that are, relatively close to me, they just, follow to support. And honestly, that's where I feel like, the 200 or so subscriber followers really came from, that we even have right now. And still trying to grow that out. But it's frustrating to like see that I've kind of plateaued at like 230 or something like that, because I'd like to continue growing that following. Um, but aside from just the Instagram piece, on the actual episodes, it ranges. Like some episodes can hit, you know, ranging numbers. Like I'll have an episode that hits like 20 or 30 listens, then another one that gets like 70 or 80 or 100. And it
Yeah.
just kind of depends. And I try not to get attached to that piece so much, as opposed to just like the process and thinking about who's being impacted. Because I went into it believing like, and if I had something like this, I would totally take advantage of it, because I try to really put myself out there as a resource as much as possible. Like I have a Google Voice phone number that's in the link of every single one of my podcasts, that I would love for student athletes to reach out with me about questions. And I have an email that's totally open, and stuff like that. And I've had a couple people like swipe up or comment on some posts and stuff. And I love engaging with the student athletes like that, to help them out and to just try to be a resource and a plug for them in that way. Because I think that's ultimately the most rewarding part, is helping other athletes get to the point that they want to, like just get to where their goals are at. Because for me, it was such a rewarding and fulfilling experience, that if I can make another athlete feel that, um, the mission's accomplished.
Yeah, 100%, man. Let me ask you this, kind of sticking with the podcast thing, and we'll take Steph off the table. Maybe it's not even, maybe that wouldn't be your answer, but we'll just take him off the table. Uh, who's your dream podcast guest?
Kendrick Lamar.
Kendrick Lamar. Okay, very nice.
He's my favorite artist. So I would, and you don't really see him like on that many podcasts or really out there. He's super quiet. So
Has he
I
ever
would,
done one?
I, I've seen some clips, so he's had to have sat down on them at some point, but he's just so in his grind and in his element. And I listen to his music when I train and when I do really anything. So for me, I would absolutely have to. I don't know how I would tie it into anything related to student athletes, but I would find a way and get them on. Absolutely.
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna go
A
out on a limb
bonus.
and say that would be your most downloaded episode of all time.
100%. That would be a bonus episode. Just nothing to do with sports at all. But yeah, no, that would be awesome.
What's your favorite album?
I personally, I have to go with Good Kid, Mad City. I know that
Yeah,
some people would say To Pimp a Butterfly, which I can see the argument for. But for me, the flow on Good Kid, Mad City, for whatever reason, when I put that on when I'm shooting, when I go on the gun to try to get 500 makes up, and I just listen to that song from start to finish. I really just get in the zone. Like I kind of disappear in the music, and the story that he paints and the picture is beautiful.
I'm gonna say it. It's basically a flawless album.
I would personally agree.
Yeah,
I mean, some people don't like the one song that is a little bit of a dud would be Real,
sure,
like because it's just like a
sure.
little like super repetitive and can be kind of annoying or whatever. But I don't even care. I think from start to finish, like no skips, just absorb the storyline.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah. And I think even Real has its place on the album. Like
it
it's
does.
part of the larger story. But I know what you mean. It's one of those that's most people are probably gonna skip. But
Yeah,
um, anyways, this is not a hip hop podcast. We could talk about this all day as well. But
of
um,
course. I
that's a
love the
great answer,
question.
man. That's not what I was expecting at all. So I'm glad. Now, would Steph have been the answer if I?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
good.
As
I'm
soon
glad.
as you said Steph was off the table, I kind of wanted to think of maybe a basketball player or like a life type person, but I don't know. I just Kendrick would be so interesting. I feel like,
Oh yeah, that'd be a great interview. Very
yeah,
very interesting, and yeah, to get him out of the cave would be an
yeah,
accomplishment in and of itself. So I
couldn't agree
love it,
more.
man. Well, hey man, like I said before, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. I've just got one more question for you. This is kind of the big one, the one that we like to end with, especially with a new guest to the show. Obviously, this is called Home Team Sacramento. You're from our home team here in Sacramento. You played so much of your basketball career here in Sacramento, and obviously, I would have to imagine that a large piece of you is still here in Sacramento. And I'm always curious. At the end of the day, when you can look back at your life and everything you accomplished, what is the legacy that you want to leave for the home team here in Sacramento?
Yeah, no. First and foremost, I would say Sacramento, 916 is a special place. Like I don't hesitate to say I'm from Sacramento any day. Like I wear that on my sleeve. I'm super proud. Just being a kid from Sacramento, regardless. Um, the legacy that I'd like to leave, honestly, like all my family's from Sacramento too. And the legacy, I mean, honestly, I tried, just in high school, even like within, San Juan and the San Juan Unified School District. Like I wrote for the Citrus Heights Sentinel. Like I'm a published author with the Sentinel, so I have like some pieces up with them. So looking back at my legacy, I feel like you would see that I was a service leader, a servant leader, and always, gave back to others and truly just I really try to be just a selfless person and give back, and hopefully my resume does reflect that in not only just what I'm trying to get into now with the podcasting, and I had a YouTube channel for quite a bit, but in everything that I do, just trying to give back and trying to make the next generation better and just try to uplift in every way that I can. I feel like is the legacy that I want to leave, and always wearing that 916 on my sleeve, and truly just being that like I said, bringing that resource for the next people coming up, whether it be in Sacramento or the broader area. If I'm trying to reach other people, um, yeah, just really foster some success. And honestly, Sacramento's a great place, so nothing but love for Sacktown.
There we go. Man, I appreciate you being on the podcast. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Where can people follow you, the podcast, everything? What do you have coming up next with the podcast? Let us know.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. So on Instagram at Nanik Tagore. All my social media is honestly just my name. If you look me up, you'll find me. Google, YouTube, whatever. I put myself out there a lot, so it's very very easy to find me. And if you have any questions and stuff like that, for your audience, if you want to get to know me or follow me, my DMs are open for questions or anything like that. For student athletes or life advice stuff like that. For the podcast, Instagram at True to Life Podcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. If you go on Instagram, I have a link tree in the bio for all the audio links, and things like that for, to follow and to check in there. And yeah, and again, if anything I said resonated with you, then it was all worth it. And I appreciate you again, Josh, for having me on the home team sack. I mean, this is a great channel and a great, a podcast. I think your guys' mission is absolutely wonderful. Just connecting everyone together and just bridging that gap between, the great people of Sacramento and the broader audience. So hats off to you too.
Man, I appreciate that for sure. And you guys definitely make sure you go follow Nanik and True to Life. Follow both, and you won't be disappointed. And if you are a student athlete, make sure you listen to the podcast. And if you know a student athlete, make sure you tell them about the podcast and get them to listen to that, because especially if they have any desire to play at the next level, or even if they're just wanting to figure out what's next in life, uh, check out the podcast, because so much good information. You have a lot of great guests, and then make sure you're listening to his solo episodes, because solo episodes are really hard. So just listen to him. Make it worth his time. Make it
There
worth
we
his
go.
time.
I
Don't let,
appreciate the plug right there. I needed that.
absolutely, man. So, hey, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Josh. Appreciate you having me on.